the moment our fellow geeks, weebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerfherder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Mike Mjolnir Evans. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, another episode. Here we are.
Another episode. We hope you enjoyed our after-school special.
I enjoyed it.
We so diligently put together and curated with love and nostalgia, and I hope that maybe it dredged up some memories for some of our listeners as well.
Well, I had to give you kudos because some of those sound bites that you came up with were pretty. You had to dig. I know you did.
Yeah, and I know it's a very small niche of people that may understand any of our picks that we gave up on that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You know, especially like the Magic Garden. You're kind of like, if you didn't live in New York, you don't know who they are.
Yeah, and for the STM Club, if you didn't live in Syracuse.
Well, that's even more. That's probably had like 12 people that watched it.
Yeah.
But I truly appreciated the fact that you went out of your way to find the sound effect for the little rascals. Whoa. I actually cracked up. I'm like, he found it. Whoa.
And this week, we are doing a tribute of sorts to Jim Henson and his epic 1982 fantasy and the current prequel series. And I'm talking about The Dark Crystal.
Dark Crystal.
Yes.
Age of Resistance. Available on Netflix.
Now, we've often mentioned The Dark Crystal, but it's one of these that we've never covered. And there's a lot, of course, we mention a lot of movies that we would like to cover, and this has been one of them. And I think it's, what are we, episode 77, 76 at this
78, 77 maybe?
Yeah, it was all very good years, by the way.
77 being exceptional.
Finally, we've come to The Dark Crystal. I think we should probably, once we get into it, talk about the movie first and then the prequel, just because that's how most people...
That was my question to you, which is, how do we go about this?
Yeah, I think we do it that way because you need that. Even watching these things, I think it would mean more to you if you watch the movie first, got that background of that world and those characters, and then moved back in time. Because then you don't need to be explained what a gelfling is, or what a podling is, or what a Skeksis is.
No, but it does kind of bring up other questions, because the prequel series takes place a couple thousand years before the movie.
Yes.
Right?
And I've got questions as well.
Right. So, yeah, it's kind of like connecting the dots a little bit, but I don't think that it takes away. And I don't necessarily think that you really have to be invested in the original movie to enjoy this.
I think you're right. If you think about it, if you watched The Phantom Menace without seeing any of the other movies, first of all,
right.
You're like, what is this crap? No wonder I've never watched Star Wars before in my life. What is this? And so
forever.
But Age of Resistance is not like that whatsoever. It really is a worthy successor to the original, and in some ways surpasses it, I thought.
Oh, way surpasses it.
Yeah,
we'll get into it, but we do have some news. You want to talk a little news? And anybody who's listened to more than one episode, especially the last episode, Jim was on a little bit of a vacation. Yes. And he went to a galaxy far, far away, and we need to talk about that.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, as most people that know me know, I'm a huge Disney parks fanatic. And I have been to Disney World at least 12, 15 times throughout my life, as a kid and then as an adult and bringing my son. So we go usually every other year, every other 2 years. So we go pretty regularly. But I have never, since I was maybe 2 or 3 years old, been to Disneyland in California.
I was going to say, there's a difference.
There is a big difference, which I discovered.
Disneyland is the original in California.
Yeah. So I had little to no memory of Disneyland, obviously, because I was so young. The only memory I had was being terrified of the submarine ride. Didn't even go on it, but just walking by the submarine ride. And I remember looking at a book before we came. One of my parents showed me like a big, nice hardcover of Disneyland, and seeing a lot of the descriptions of the rides. And I saw that the submarine ride had a giant squid attack section.
So you're talking about 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yes, but I am, but I'm not, because Disneyland, the ride is called Submarine Voyage, and it does not look like the Nautilus. It's just,
really?
They've always been regular submarines.
Oh, that's weird.
Then when they opened Disney World, it was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Huh, but they never went back and retrofit the other one.
Right, but I believe that, or maybe I was confusing the two in my head, 20,000 Leagues, but when I was a little kid, I thought a giant squid lived in that lagoon.
He does.
And when I even walked by on the walkway where the submarines were and that overlooks the lagoon, I didn't even want to look. I thought the squid was going to reach out and grab me.
Get you. So imagine a little kid now after watching Jurassic World and the Mosasaurus. He goes by the water tanks and he's like, I ain't going over there.
Oh, I'll tell you about that too, because I rode the Jurassic World ride in Universal Studios.
Oh, cool. Okay.
But yeah, and
this could be a whole episode, you know.
This could be a whole episode, yes.
Now, Jim just came back yesterday, and I've not spoken. You've been posting pictures on the Facebook page.
Yes.
And we've got people who appreciate that, and I appreciated it because you were bandying about the different parks, but we have not spoken, so I'm curious to hear your takeaway on the big one. The Galaxy's Edge that we were reporting, people were saying that it was empty. It's a disappointment.
Well, I would say that it is a disappointment on some levels, but it is amazing on other levels. You see, I had a strategy. I did a lot of research before I went. And from what I understood, September is a very slow time of year at both Disneyland and Disney World. Now, I don't really have anything to compare it to because I've never been to Disneyland before, but it was fairly crowded. Right. I think the longest wait I saw was 60 minutes for the new Cars Land ride. And apparently waits can go up to like 300 minutes if it's a really busy day. So I guess we did hit it at a sweet spot. And that was the longest wait that I saw was an hour for any ride, even more so than the Smuggler's Run. But so I had a strategy that everything that I read from all these experts who had been there say that most people were running to Star Wars Land as soon as they got in the park in the morning. So the morning would be the busiest time to visit Star Wars Land. So I took that to heart, and I waited to even go there until probably about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Even though every time we walked by it, it was just like, oh, there it is. Nope, not going to go. I'm not going to go. So waited till 3 o'clock, and they do have it cordoned off, so you can't really see what's in there until you actually enter the land itself. So there's no.
So you literally like walk through an archway, and you're presented with the world.
Exactly, and the closest land that it's adjacent to is Frontierland. So there are two entrances to Galaxy's Edge, and they're both coming out of Frontierland. So you're going under tunnels for each of them. And half the tunnel is all like you're inside a mine car, and then it slowly blends into a Star Wars tunnel.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's a nice transition from one land to the other.
Huh.
So then you enter it, and you're not presented with that big replica of the Millennium Falcon right away. You have to kind of wind your way around some alleyways to get to it. But I will tell you this, that it is not based on anything I believe that we've seen in the movies so far. The land that
it's a brand new world.
Yeah, they call it Batuu, I think it's called.
Yep,
some kind of spaceport. And there's a little droid making factory. There's a cantina. There's a bunch of places to eat. And you've got a little stand where you can buy a glass of blue milk as Luke drinks in the 1977 original.
So this land, though, the time period is the current trilogy with Rey and Finn, right?
It is, because you have the First Order walking around. You've got newfangled stormtroopers walking around. So it is set in the present time of the movies. And that's where I was disappointed. And I've read some stuff online about this as well, where it's not really familiar to old school Star Wars.
Right.
Like you're stepping into the world of the new movies, and it's not like you're in
and they've been divisive to begin with. So it's like,
right. So like it's not like you're in Endor or Tatooine, or that would have been cool if you were in that port of
sure,
Tatooine.
yeah. Give me a speeder bike ride.
Exactly, and saw the Falcon there where it's parked in the movie, right? So, but no, that's not the case. So you're walking around, and there's a lot of nice little Easter eggs. They've got like a little parking area where they have a replica of a land speeder and a few other vehicles, and they have an Imperial drone, just like you've seen at the beginning of The Empire Strikes Back on Hoth. So they have that there.
Oh, the robot.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And so then you finally wind your way around, and then you see that Millennium Falcon there, which is just like you've seen in any picture of it. It's full size, exactly to scale as it is in the movie. So,
but you can't get very close to it, can you?
No. That is the other thing, is that it's fenced off. So you can't touch it. You can't really get under it. You can almost, if the sun is just in a certain way, you can hit its shade, but you can't really get under it. And of course,
and it almost looks like you can only see it from like one perspective. Like I've never seen anybody take a picture of it from the front of the ship. Like you're like 3/4 where the cockpit is. Picture.
No, that is not true, because
you can wind your way around it.
You can walk around the front half of it all the way around.
Gotcha.
There are photographers there, and we got a picture like directly in front of it.
Okay.
But the ride, Smuggler's Run, is the building for that ride is situated directly behind the Millennium Falcon itself. A lot of people have thought that you actually get into this replica to take the ride. That is not the case. You do not go into this replica whatsoever.
Bummer.
It's in the building behind it, and it's kind of set up as you're going through. And just like any queue in Disneyland or Disney World, they really pull out all the stops to put you in the world of this ride. So even the queues are very immersive. The lines are very immersive. So this Smuggler's Run ride runs through what looks like a big garage. And it's new characters as well. They reference Chewbacca. They don't reference Han Solo. They don't reference Lando. But it's like smugglers that are working on different ships and talking about how you just hear all this over the loudspeakers. Like, let's get this shipment of this, whatever it is, into this ship and take off in 5 minutes. Or so you hear all these things going on, and sound effects of like mechanics working on spaceships. So it's basically like walking through like a Fast and the Furious set, but with spaceships in there instead of cars.
Right. Okay. So maybe that's part of the detriment, right? That where people are like, I'm not, I go to Disney World, I want to see Mickey Mouse. I want to meet, Snow White. So you send me to Star Wars Land, but I'm not meeting Chewbacca. I'm not seeing R2 and 3PO walking around taking pictures with them.
Only Chewie was there. He was the only representative of the original classic characters that was walking around.
So you're completely dismissive of our generation of Star Wars fans who have the disposable income and a family to bring there.
Right.
You're missing out.
And they did have, in one of the stores, in the Droid Factory, they did have a big life-size R2 display, but it wasn't interactive. It wasn't moving around or anything. Back to Smuggler's Run. So you're going through this queue, and you finally get out of this garage-type facility, and then you get into the pre-show, where you have another new character. I forget what his name is, but he's kind of the head of this garage that's coordinating all these smugglers going in and out. And so he tells the riders that are gathered there that you are going to help Chewie out on this run by co-piloting the Millennium Falcon, and you've got to steal, I forget what the substance was. I think they mentioned it in the Solo movie. So you've got to steal the substance and bring it back to the bay, and then they're going to smuggle it somewhere else. That's your mission. So from there, from that pre-show, and this is all audio animatronics, it's no live actors, which is what you expect from Disney. I'm kind of disappointed when it's not animatronics. I want it to be animatronics. So then you're given a job. It's very organized. There's 6 people can ride this at a time. And I'm assuming that they have multiple rides going on simultaneously because the line was moving pretty quickly. So
yeah, that's kind of like Back to the Future. If you look to the left or right, you saw like 5 other DeLoreans.
yeah, that's exactly
the big open screen in front of you.
Must have been, yeah. I think it was very similar to that from what I was looking at.
Okay.
So they give you your job in the cockpit of the Falcon. So there's 6 people that go into the cockpit. 2 are pilots who sit in the front, right by the windows. 2 are the gunners, which sit behind them, and then you have the engineers, which are behind them.
So you each have a job.
So you each have a job, and you're
so it's interactive in that regard?
Yes, it is very
that's
interactive
cool.
in that regard.
Okay.
So you're each given a card, and your whole crew is a color. So I had the green team. And then the next 6 after you might have the blue team. The next 6 after them might have the yellow team. So then they say, okay, when we call the green team, come back here, but now you're allowed to go search the inside of the Falcon for however long until we call the green team.
Okay.
So that's when they send you off into this room and you're in the Millennium Falcon. So
that's where you take your picture with the chessboard.
The chessboard, yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's like a full-on.
But it's still, you've got like 3 other teams of 6 in there with you. So you're all fighting at the same time to get to that chessboard.
to get to that spot.
And take that picture before they call your team.
Right.
So, and I did manage, we rode this twice while we were there. So I did manage to get 1 photo on the chessboard, but the second time there were so few people that we just got right in. We didn't even have time to, to look around.
Yeah.
But, it's really just that room and that's about it. And you don't see all like the little nooks and crannies of the Falcon. It's just that big room with the chessboard. So then they let you into the ride itself, and it is a very nice recreation of the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon, and you're looking out those same iconic windows that you see from the movie. So
do you have the hanging dice?
I didn't notice. I didn't look. I assumed that they did. Everything else was just spot on. And you've got like a joystick, and each pilot has their own joystick, and if you happen to be the right-hand pilot, you also have the hyperspace lever to go into hyperspace.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So,
punch it, Chewie.
And they actually tell you that, okay, if you push down on the lever, it's going to go up. If you push back, it's going to go down. Before the
so
ride
is this thing on hydraulics, or is this you're just manipulating the screen?
It is. The thing, it moves while you're in there.
All right. Okay.
But I thought to myself, because I was the pilot once, and I'm thinking to myself, there's no way that I'm going to control this game. They're telling me
you're going to crash.
They're telling me like to move up and move down, but I know even if I took my hands off this thing, I'm still going to go through the ride, right? It does react to your commands. And at the end of it, it says how many things you crashed into and like how much damage you did to the Falcon. It lights up green when it tells you to go into hyperspace. It does say play something to the effect, punch it, and then you pull back on the lever and it goes into hyperspace.
Awesome.
And then the gunners are actually shooting at whatever's on screen there. And then the engineer's job is to, whenever you see the cargo that you have to steal, is to shoot the harpoon guns to actually hook it to get it back into the Falcon. So everything is very interactive and it moves and it's great, but it is like being in like the coolest VR, like video game type setup.
Got you, without actually having like a VR helmet on or something.
Yeah. So, and I think the whole ride maybe lasts between 8 and 10 minutes, like once you're in there. That's
pretty substantial for a ride.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I thought the motion was very reminiscent of, if you've ever ridden Star Tours, it's kind of like that. It's like just like a simulator.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just don't have an annoying robot yelling at you.
Right. No. You just have that guy, the animatronic character from the beginning, the pre-show. He's on one of the screens in front of you in the Falcon, kind of telling you what to do as the ride goes along.
Okay. Don't tell me what to do. Okay, all right.
It's really cool. It's really cool. Once you're in this, so that experience doing the ride itself was great. They really did a nice job of recreating the inside of the Falcon when you're in that cockpit. And
so they need more of that stuff. They need more of that, and they need to bring in some of the original. Whether you have a speeder bike chase, the same concepts.
Oh, I think a speeder bike is going by right now. I just heard something.
I don't know what's going on.
So yeah, so again, the takeaway is that I just thought that it would have been nicer if it was something more recognizable from like the classic, if the surroundings were more classic than from the new.
Right, and I think that's I agree with you that's probably a big gripe. So.
Like to have, even if they're immobile, to have a couple of dewbacks there, to actually be able to go into the cantina with the alien band playing.
Yes, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe this is just the first step. Maybe they'll just keep building.
Now, this is the thing. This also struck me about Disneyland. Obviously, we know there's a lot less space available to them in Disneyland than there is in Disney World. Around the perimeter of Disneyland is the city of Anaheim, which built up after Disneyland opened. They didn't buy the land around where the park was going to go.
Well, that's where he was smart in Florida, where he just bought up like thousands of acres of swampland.
So when you approach this place, you're on a city street, and you're thinking, if you're used to going to Disney World, which is so far back from any highway,
right?
And okay, you're at McDonald's, and then you turn a right, and there's Disneyland within sight of the McDonald's.
That's pretty crazy.
But the thing is that once you're in there, you realize there's they've built a wall around most of it. So if you're outside the park, all you see is a wall. So you can't really see. I think maybe you can see the spire of Space Mountain, but that's about it.
Huh.
Like around the entire perimeter.
Now Hyperspace Mountain, right?
Now it's Hyperspace Mountain, yes.
Right. I like that.
So yeah, and that's another thing, is that there was so much Star Wars going on in Tomorrowland. It's like they've got two Star Wars lands, pretty much.
Yeah.
And Hyperspace Mountain, it's the same ride, but it's completely Star Wars themed now. It's a dogfight, really, between X-Wings and TIE fighters. So you're in an X-Wing, and your job is to destroy all the TIE fighters you can. And It's not interactive. Awesome. You're just seeing screens of this dogfight as you're going through Space Mountain, which was cool. But I don't know how I feel about that, because the original Space Mountain was pretty cool in itself, and it was a unique experience in itself. So
yeah, because it was pitch black.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah. Huh.
So all this IP that's taking over Disneyland, and it's completely eclipsing all the original that original flavor that made Disneyland.
Well, just wait.
So unique.
Once they start pulling in the Marvel stuff too, and
oh yeah, that was in California Adventure, which is the park adjacent to Disneyland, and they don't even call it the Magic Kingdom. It's just Disneyland, which is the main park, and then California Adventure is right next to it. And when you go in there is a big section that's walled off right next to the new Cars World that just says Stark Industries on the fence. So so you can only wonder what's going to be there.
Right.
Some sort of Iron Man attraction, perhaps? Who knows?
Oh, sure. I'm sure it's going to be full on superheroes. Well, cool. I'm glad. It looked like you had fun.
Yeah, we had a great time.
I was impressed with the Godzilla star on the Walk of Fame. When did he get that?
That was probably 2 years ago.
Oh,
it was very recent. It was very recent. Yeah.
Matthew Broderick wasn't there, right?
One of the producers, I remember seeing photos of the dedication, and of course they had a guy in a Godzilla suit.
They should.
It was the 2000 version of the Godzilla suit. So like the Millennial series.
Right.
And I think they had one of the producers there, if I'm not mistaken. Not sure who else, but I knew that star was there, and I searched it out, and it was pretty close to the Grauman Chinese Theater, so it was in a central spot.
But he never put his feet in concrete.
No, he did not.
Right?
That would take up. I think that would. They'd have to take out. They'd have to take out Marilyn. They'd have to take out.
Talking about the costume, though.
Yeah, you would think that they would do that,
right? Because R2 and 3PO.
And Darth Vader too. Darth Vader
all have their feet there.
But I also saw some other notable stars. They had Mickey Mouse. They had Woody Woodpecker, Bugs Bunny. Chuck Jones had his own star there.
As well he should. I think Weird Al Yankovic just got a star.
Really? I didn't see him.
Yes. Yeah.
He might be all the way down at the end of the string.
Well, they're running out of space. Like, where do you put it after?
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, do they have to take away stars to put all these new ones in?
That would be horrible.
That would.
Right? Yeah, we're going to get rid of this William H. Macy.
So I also had to, in my travels up and down Hollywood Boulevard, I also, being such a huge David Bowie fan, I had to find his star. So I took my photo next to his star as well.
Cool.
But what I was surprised at, and the tour guide on the bus warned us of this, is that all these characters that are dressed up
are not licensed.
Like ad hoc Mickey Mouse or Superman. He said they're very friendly when they approach you. But if you happen to take a picture with one, then they become adamant that you pay them some exorbitant amount of money, and they will follow you until you pay them. So, like, if they approach you, do not make eye contact. Just keep walking.
Dad, the Elmo's following me.
And there was one guy in a Superman suit that was just, it was so sad. He was covered in acne. It was terrible.
Super loser, man. Give me your money or I'll heat vision you.
And let me just one more aside before we leave Disneyland. When we spoke about my last Disney World trip, I talked about the phenomenon of the yoga or the ass pant, as I like to call
it. The yoga pants.
Boom, baba, boom, baba. Boom, baba, boom, baba, boom.
That wasn't really in great display here at Disneyland, I have to say. The maximum capacity of ass pant was probably at about 25%. It was taking its place, however. The word of the day at Disneyland is augmentation.
Augmentation.
There is so much deep cleavage on display that you feel like you're going to fall into a precipice. If Pennywise was there, he would be in his glory. It would be just balloons squeaking all day long. Like, it was unbelievable. And yeah, because you're in California, right? So, and a lot of these people are locals, and you especially get this in the evening. The crowds weren't really there in the morning and during the day, but in the evening it really picked up. And then you realize it's a lot of teenagers or people in their early 20s, and that's when you see the parade of balloons going by in every which way. So it is Los Angeles, it is, that
is true. That is the I know exactly what you're gonna say.
Yeah. So
capital of the world is.
Yep. So just wanted to give a shout out to the plastic surgeons whose work I saw quite a bit of in Disneyland.
Bravo.
So there you go.
Well, thank you very much for that update, Jim.
Yes. You're welcome. Welcome.
Sounds like you had a good time.
I did.
Awesome.
I did.
Yeah. I did mention I have one news item.
Okay.
We want to talk about
news. Yes, news.
Sam Esmail, which I'm not familiar with, but he is the creator of Mr. Robot.
Mr. Robot, yes.
Which you've watched.
Yep.
On his Twitter feed last week, announced a new Battlestar Galactica. Now, apparently this is not a sequel to the sci-fi masterpiece. He said that we are going to leave that alone, but this is going to be a new story within the mythology, staying true to the spirit of Battlestar. So are we talking like Caprica 2.0? Like we know the story of the Galactica. It played out. So where are we going with this storyline? It's got to be all new characters.
And is he talking about the mythology coming off of the sci-fi show or the original?
Yeah. Okay. No, the Ron Moore reboot that came in 2000.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's the first I've heard of it.
Yeah, I was going to say they tried that already.
Right. But it's only going to be exclusive on NBC's new streaming service, the Peacock. So I don't know. They're trying to entice us left and right. Right now, I don't know any more about it other than the fact that, listen, that show, that was actually one of the shows that cemented our relationship. Because that Galactica show just was unlike anything we had seen before.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
But
another service to pay for? Another service? Really? I don't know.
Yeah, I know. But they got to do something, right? They got to generate content.
It's true. But speaking of that, another news item I wasn't even thinking of until you mentioned this. All you Disney Visa card holders out there, before I left for my trip this days before I left for my trip, I got a piece of what I thought was junk mail. But when I looked a little bit closer, it was a coupon to sign up for the Disney Plus service exclusively. Now, this was exclusive to Disney Visa card members. So if you're not, I guess you're kind of in the cold. But if you are, they're doing a promotion where if you go on the Disney Visa website, they're going to give you an extremely discounted rate for 3 years of Disney Plus. So this is a subscription. And I think when you work it out, it's like $4 a month. So,
wow.
And I think the current price, what we were thinking about was $7 or $8 a month is what they're opening.
I think it was like $8.99. I think was the opening salvo.
Yeah.
Or at least what they had talked about.
So if you think about it, they're probably going to raise that year in and year out. So if you're a Disney Visa card holder, I would think it's going to be worth your while to look into this because you're locked in for 3 years at about $4 a month. And I am definitely going to do it myself.
That sounds like a deal. You're not going to be able to get this Disney content anywhere else.
And there's going to be a lot of it. There's going to be a lot of it, as we know.
Okay. All right. We're going to get off this. But my Disney aside, which is I was online today and they were talking about the VHS tapes that we all had loved that are now going for ridiculous prices on eBay. Now,
VHS tapes?
VHS tapes.
Oh.
The Disney Black Diamond series in particular, which I had. My kids are 19 years old. When that stuff all came out on VHS, I owned it. When it all went over to DVD, I donated it to my library. Supposedly the top one right now, Lion King, $37,000. And I'm like, there's no way.
What?
Yeah. No, the Beauty and the Beast is up there as well. It's like a 21,000. I'm like, listen, I don't believe anything I read on the internet, but it just is kind of like, that's outrageous. I got to do an eBay search because that's a lot of money I threw away.
That's like, asking $10,000 for an 8-track cartridge. It's the VHS.
Right. It doesn't. I don't buy it, but I have heard, and I've talked to other people that they are of value, but not to that level.
Right. So we're talking about the clamshell plastic cases and everything.
Yeah, with the little black diamond in the corner. And of course, we know Disney would release them and then pull them back into the quote unquote vault.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then re-release them
to this day. Yeah.
Pull them, re-release it back in the theater, and then a couple years later goes right back on disc. That's a car right there.
Yeah.
So, all right, we're done. We need to get into this movie, especially this show. We need to talk about this Dark Crystal show. So, and I'm going to tell you, we mentioned at the top that it was a rough week. We actually had 2 weeks to do our homework for this one, and I was right down to the wire. I was scrambling to finish this. We're going to talk about the original 1982 movie, first and foremost.
Oh, right. Yes, we are.
Is that what we decided?
Yes.
The Dark Crystal. It begins as a quest. You must find the shard. The crystal shard.
The crystal shard?
To save our world, gelfling. A wonder-filled fantasy adventure. Journey into a mystical realm of sights and sounds. Enter the world of the Dark Crystal.
What's it for? Is that what you want to know? You want to know what this is all about? Is that it, gelfling?
Now from directors Jim Henson and Frank Oz and Gary Kurtz, the producer of Star Wars, comes a new dimension of fantasy and adventure. Travel to another world, another time in the age of wonder. The Dark Crystal.
Okay.
So, did you see this in the theater, Jeff?
I did not see this in the theater, not in '82 by any means. And I definitely didn't see it in the drive-in. So I probably had seen it, I'm going to say probably college, because this is the type of movie that's, it's a little dark.
Yeah.
It's not really kid friendly, even though you got Jim Henson and Frank Oz both coming off the Muppets, which are about as happy-go-lucky as you can be, Sesame Street and whatnot. And I think this guy was like tapping into his dark soul. And it was just, it's taken on. I think it was a bomb, right, when it first came out.
It did turn a profit, but it wasn't
very well.
It wasn't a huge hit.
But it's definitely grown. It was the highest grossing movie in 1983 in France and Japan, though. But
Really?
yeah, I had a couple guys who were like audiophiles, and they had nice big sound systems and bring your television, and we probably watched it on VHS. That cost $200 when it came out.
Yeah.
Or we rented it from Blockbuster,
Right. The most vivid memory I have originally from The Dark Crystal was the cover of Famous Monsters magazine when the movie first came out. And it was a lovely, lovely cover. It was an illustrated picture of the Skeksis. And I think it may have been lifted right from the theatrical poster.
I know exactly what you're talking. It's like a parchment paper background with the... Yeah, I know what you're talking about, the illustration.
And it was a close-up. This Famous Monsters cover was a close-up of the Skeksis from that poster. And because The Dark Crystal was released in December, that issue of Famous Monsters was in my Christmas stocking that year. So I always affiliate Dark Crystal with Christmas. And I did see it in the theater. And as a kid back then, it didn't really speak to me. It didn't resonate with me because not so much that it was dark, but I just thought the story was a bit hard to follow. And it didn't have that, it was extremely serious. And it
takes itself very seriously.
So it didn't have that Jim Henson flavor that I had come to know and love from The Muppet Show and whatsoever. So I kind of just dismissed it, I think. And I didn't watch it again, maybe since that initial viewing in the theater. And I watched it for this show and was completely blown away just by the artistry and how beautiful this thing looks. And I saw it on Netflix. I did not see it on Blu-ray. I can't imagine what it looks like in 4K or on Blu-ray.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I owned a special edition that came out a couple years ago, the DVD, and I shared it with my kids. Probably they were too young to appreciate it because it is dark and there's definitely some. The Skeksis are scary as hell.
They are even more so in the show.
Oh yeah,
terrifying in the show.
But in this regard, and it's from what I understand, this was a fight. But he had a vision, and you have to look at the artistic integrity and the heart and soul that they put into this. I mean, they're just like in Star Wars. You got guys who like, we've never done this before. Well, we'll create something. Those land striders. Let's figure out a way to put a guy on stilts with a Muppet on his back and run him through
and run.
Yeah. It's definitely a movie that, the first time out, you're kind of like, what am I watching here? Because it is kind of, they don't really explain a lot, right? They just kind of throw you into the world.
They do. Yeah. And it wasn't as, as a kid, I remember it being like too complicated for me to bother with, but it's not really. It's very
No, but I'll tell you that they did a lot of tinkering because one of the original ideas that Henson had and pushed was that a lot of these characters all had different languages. And so they went, and so there was a lot of subtitles going on, and the screening was horrible. People are like, we don't understand what's going on. We can't understand these characters. So that's where, and we'll talk about this in the prequel series too, which is, I've always gone on record, I hate when you stunt cast a well-named actor with a voice, to use the voice acting for an animation. And I always assumed that the puppeteers did the voices. And I guess originally that was true. And then when they went back and started retooling this, that's when they started bringing in other actors to voice over. And they had to change the dialogue. The guy who actually wrote the script in the alien language had to go back and rewrite dialogue. He had to translate it back into English and then make sure that it still matched with the mouth movements, so that when you watch it, it wasn't like this completely discombobulated mess. Yeah, it's definitely a movie that grows on me, and after watching the prequel, this prequel series has just elevated this movie to a whole new level.
Yeah, and I was reading that preview that you're talking about that was disastrous to preview audiences actually caused the producers of the movie to pull back on the advertising, thinking that they had a bomb on their hands.
Right, correct.
So Henson ended up buying the rights to the picture outright so he could promote it himself.
Yeah, how crazy is that? I think Universal still owns the theatrical release. Like, they could release it back in the movies, but he owns like all the home video releases and all that stuff.
Right.
Which is crazy.
Weird. Which is weird because now Henson is just so tied up with Disney.
With Disney, that's because Disney bought them out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the characters Jen and Kira, there were limitations to the puppets back then. They couldn't really emote. It's a guy's hand up it's a sock puppet. It's an elaborate sock puppet, for lack of a better. But the Skeksis, I mean, that's a full person in a costume.
It's two people, right?
That's the question, which is, we'll get into it, because I know on Netflix there's a behind the scenes making of for the prequels.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately I did not have time to watch that. So we'll get into it. But they shot this back to back while they were making the Great Muppet Caper.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, they were working on both of these simultaneously.
And you cannot get any opposite than those two features. It's just like night and day.
No, and that's, what we were saying, which was, Henson just has that happy-go-lucky name associated with him from, Sesame Street, and then, the Muppets. You can't say the word Muppet without breaking out in a smile.
Yeah, and he did.
I'm sorry.
I was reading, he did want to go dark with this and do something to the effect of a modern-day Grimm's fairy tale.
Yeah. And, I mean, there's some disturbing scenes.
So let's talk about the plot a little bit so we can give some background to any of those uninitiated to the Dark Crystal. We're set up in this world of Thra is the name of the planet.
Now, I did not, I'm going to say right now, I did not rewatch this movie for this episode. I didn't have time. I barely made it through the 10 episodes of the prequel, but I did read that they don't mention Thra as the world once in this movie. Is that accurate?
I believe that is the case, because when I watched the Age of Resistance and there were, every other word.
Everything is Thra, right?
Yeah. I'm like, did they? I don't, because I didn't recognize it from the first movie.
Gotcha. Okay. So
I think you're right. I think they just set it up that you're in this world and they don't really explain. I think from what I'm reading from the research that I did around the first movie, that a lot of that backstory is fleshed out in the novelization, which Henson had a lot of. He didn't just want it to be your standard movie tie-in promotional thing, that he wanted to go deeper with the novelization. And there was even, he had a fight with the author, and the guy's name escapes me now, who actually wrote the movie tie-in. But he added his own scene with the Gartham, which is the giant insect-like creatures that serve the Skeksis. In one part of this novel, he had one of the Gartham had a sack of podlings that he threw to their deaths over a precipice. And Henson's like, wait, that's too dark. And they fought back and forth. And Henson actually, had to have the guy pull the scene because he didn't want to go there. But yeah, apparently that novel goes deeper into the story.
Was it Alan Dean Foster?
It wasn't Alan Dean Foster.
It wasn't, no, because he was like notorious back in the day. Like, he would do any tie-in movie adaptation.
And there was also a Marvel Comics tie-in, if I remember correctly.
Yes, yeah. Yep. I think it was a straight up graphic novel. It was a big
yeah. So we're in this world. We later learned in the Age of Resistance that it's called Thra, this planet. And we're told that the gelfling have all but been wiped out with the exception of one. Later we find out it's two. But in the beginning of the movie, there's Jen, who is a male. That was a little bit confusing to me as well.
As a kid, wait a minute. Well, they're very androgynous.
Yeah, they are.
So, and I will tell you, my son watched the last episode with me, and we were like 20 minutes in. He goes, "Wait, that's a boy?" It's like, just go with it.
So Jen is almost like the Mowgli of the Dark Crystal. He's raised not by wolves, but by the mystics, who are benevolent, very kind, wise, old
Sage
species. They have 4 arms, and they walk around and they're hunched over like these old, wizened.
So he looks like a sad camel.
Yes, that's
a big nose, but they have these beautiful ornamental design work within their facial structures.
Right, very reminiscent of Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas. All that design work that permeates that movie is like in the sidewalks and in the background.
Yeah, I was actually going to say if you even want to use X-Men, when they brought in Nightcrawler and he had done the scroll work in his face, which doesn't exist in the comic books. They did that specifically for the movie. But it has the same kind of very organic, spirally.
It is, yeah, and this is all woven into the skin or etched into the skin of these mystics. And there's 10 mystics that we open up with. And so they are raising Jen, who is the last gelfling. He's the last of his kind. And as soon as he comes of age, they give him a mission. He is to find the missing shard from the Dark Crystal, which is in the castle of the Skeksis. And they are draining this crystal, which is kind of the life force of Thra. They're draining the crystal of its energy to make themselves immortal. And in doing so, they are causing what they call the darkening.
The darkening,
Thra, which is kind of eating up all the wildlife and vegetation. So it's making it really a desert world, kind of like global warming in a way.
Yeah, basically. So the Skeksis are Republicans?
Yeah. So that's the setup of the movie. Jen, the gelfling, has to find this shard. He has to put it back into the crystal, and he will bring balance to the Force. Well, not
Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
Anakin, I'm sorry. You were supposed to bring balance to the Force, not destroy it.
That's the setup. So on the way, Jen realizes that he is not the only gelfling left in existence. Kira. So he finds a female counterpart in Kira, who has her own little Fizzgig, which is like a little Paris Hilton type dog.
It is a lap dog with 2 rows of teeth. Giant mouth with 2 rows of teeth.
So he convinces Kira to go on this mission with him. And as the movie goes on, you meet the character of Aughra, who is kind of like the mother of Thra. And there's one scene where he's in Aughra's chamber, and she's got this big observatory telescope kind of a contraption with revolving planets.
It's a beautiful. This is the thing, which is we've mentioned Jim Henson and Frank Oz. These are all practical. This is all real built. It's not animated. It's physical props. It's people in costumes. It's puppets, Muppets, and it's just the world building is pretty impressive.
It's so beautiful.
And you talk about that. You talk about that mechanism. It's like a solar system. You got planets, revolving around each other, and it's all these neat, almost like steampunk looking mechanisms that are controlling it. So well realized. It's very impressive.
And you're not really given much background of this character, but you are later on in Age of Resistance. You find out exactly what that thing means. You're kind of left a little bit in the dark. You just have to accept it when you're watching the original Dark Crystal.
Right. Like you said, they don't really give you a lot. They just throw you into the world.
Yeah. Aughra says, I don't know which one the shard is, but here, it's one of these things. So he has to pick the right shard. I'm like, just take them all.
Right. Right. Why do you have to just choose one?
Yeah.
You can't just do like Pringles.
All see which one fits when you're there.
Like Lay's potato chips. You can't just eat one.
Exactly. Yeah.
How about I'll bring you back the 2 that don't work.
Yeah.
Deal. Done.
And
that would have been like a 2-minute movie.
And Aughra has some pretty mean facial hair, I have to say.
Oh yeah, she's like Aunt Bunny. Aunt Bunny got a mustache.
She rivals Paul Giamatti, I think. In the facial hair.
Mustache.
Drop your credentials at the guard's desk and get the out of here.
Yeah. Now she has one eye is gouged out, but she has a forehead eye.
She has a forehead eye because she's all seeing, right?
She's all seeing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, her importance is really kind of played down in the first movie. She's in there, and she is like a seer Yoda type character.
Right. That's exactly what she is.
She really comes to the
As a matter of
fore.
fact, I think that Frank Oz originally, because he was the puppeteer for her, and he did the voice the first go around, and it was a little too Yoda-ish.
Really, yeah.
Yeah. Because you got to figure that was 2 years after Empire.
Yeah, it was. It was very close
Yeah.
on the heels of Empire. They
Yeah.
actually filmed it throughout 1981, from what I understand. So then, of course, we're not talking about the Skeksis yet, really, to much degree. They kind of have the crystal hostage. You learn later that Aughra was the original keeper of the crystal, but they coerced it out from under her, and they've taken control of it, and are sucking the lifeblood out of it to keep themselves immortal. And that's pretty much where you are when this new movie begins. You're given all this kind of backstory of what the Skeksis are.
And it's funny you mentioned, because we just recorded, we watched Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and it's basically the same concept, which is these clowns come from outer space and just suck the essence out of people.
So in this case, it sucks them down into a little vial so that you're drinking their essence.
Yeah. I mean, the Skeksis didn't invent the silly straw yet, I guess.
It's almost kind of like in the original Batman movie, how the villains turn the entire United Nations into
into cubes.
Yeah, into little piles of Kool-Aid.
Oh, that's right. They were like
on each of their chairs.
Multicolored.
So the big reveal at the end of Dark Crystal is that you have 10 Skeksis and you have 10 mystics. And you might think to yourself, that's a coincidence. Yeah. They each have 4 arms. They each have 2 legs, but...
And the funny thing is, with the Skeksis, you never really... I mean, in the prequel, we're mixing and matching here now, but in the prequel, it's a little more evident that they have 4 arms.
Yeah.
But you don't, in this movie, you don't really see that except for the one scene where they strip him down, and you see, because they're like coming out of the shoulder blades.
They are, yeah.
They're like worthless. It's like, why do you even have them for?
It's like little T-Rex arms.
Right, correct.
Like higher, yeah.
Like I couldn't even scratch my own back with those things. It's just like, they're worthless.
And talking about the Skeksis, you can't not talk about Lord Chamberlain, who is the showcase Skeksi in here. Yes. So and his dialogue is all
Quiet!
It's almost like he's the Skeksis equivalent of Mikey from the Life commercial.
Did you try it? I'm not gonna try it. You try it. I'm not gonna try it. Let's get Mikey. Yeah. He won't eat it. He hates everything. He likes it. Hey, Mikey.
Lord Chamberlain. He likes anything.
And that is one of the more fun aspects of this is the voice actors for the Skeksis are just, we'll get into it with the other one, which is Mark Hamill comes in as the scientist.
Oh, yeah.
Every now and again he would channel his inner Joker. You pick up on the Joker, but Simon Pegg picks up the mantle of Chamberlain and just kills it.
And he is, even in the first one, he is so duplicitous and just backstabbing. And
Yep.
Stay, friend. Prophecy caused all this trouble.
That prophecy?
Yes.
That's why Skeksis killed Gelfling?
Yes. Bad mistake. Skeksis afraid. Fear Gelfling.
But you're Skeksis.
But I am friend. Save you from Garthim.
Yeah, he was kind of like a Jar Jar Binks weird.
So at the end of the Dark Crystal, after Jen and Kira have their odyssey and they make it to the castle, of course, they do bring balance. He puts the shard back in and you've got a happy ending. Kira is killed, but then she's brought back. And you find out the big reveal at the end is that the Skeksis and the Mystics are in fact the same beings, but were ripped apart when they they don't really say how it happened, but they broke that shard off of the Dark Crystal. Yeah. And in doing so, they ripped their 2 selves
Splintered
apart.
themselves.
So there's their good half and their bad half, the Skeksis being bad and the Mystics being the good half.
What was sundered and undone shall be whole, the 2 made one.
And now the prophecy is fulfilled.
We are again one.
They do kind of look similar. I guess if you put them back together, you'd probably have a mishmash creature that doesn't look like really either of them.
But it is, and they don't. The being that they become, the Skeksis, I think that they're called,
Skeksis,
are very bizarre looking, and they look nothing like either the Skeksis or the Mystics. Just like they look like these 9 foot tall, like alien beings.
Yeah, which is what they are. They're aliens.
Which is what they are. Yes. Yeah. But they don't really explain that in the Dark Crystal. They take pains to explain it in the Age of Resistance, that they're not from Thra. But you don't really know where they're from watching Dark Crystal.
Nope. I guess, people for years have been begging for a sequel, and Frank Oz was like, why? Like, I guess he felt the story was done. It was like, that was what we would set up. But it's been picked up, like you said. There was a Marvel comic adaptation, but there's been comic books that have gone back into that world. And they've tried, numerous people have tried to get this up and running. Obviously, after Henson's death, you got to look at it. The Henson company's like, well, we got this property here, and we should do something with it. We could do something. There's so much potential. But I want to point out the fact that this guy, Brian Froud, did all of the design work for the characters, the world. I mean, like literally designed everything that you're seeing, the costumes, the props. But when he came back with his initial concepts, he's showing Jim Henson, and Henson was like confused. Like he didn't know, what are you showing me? And he's like, the crystal. And he goes, no. You misunderstood me. It's dark chrysalis. There was no crystal involved in the original story plot, but this guy had spent all this time designing these beautiful crystal, and so they rewrote the script to kind of accommodate what he designed. But it really was just like this Amorpheus title that had nothing to do with the crystal, other than a transformation. Dark times were coming. Dark chrysalis. Guys, like, you should buy a thesaurus, because
now that artist that you mentioned, he looms large in the Netflix documentary. He's all over the place there, and
because like I said, he hit it. This, I mean, you can design it and you can talk about this, but for him, this is kind of like Ralph McQuarrie in the Star Wars universe. Lucas is like, I want 2 robots, and I want this, and I want a guy in a spacesuit. And McQuarrie is the one who went back and painted the initial designs for those characters that we all know and love now. And it's like, that's it. It's cemented. And this guy, Brian, like, just pulled this whole world out of his butt. I mean, that's true world building. And his son, Toby Froud, is an FX designer, and he's actually he's all over the place in this new miniseries as well. Brian married Wendy, who is a puppeteer. And this guy, Toby, the son, his claim to fame was he played baby Toby in Labyrinth.
Yes. Yeah, they do mention that in the documentary. Yeah.
Yep. So he's got quite the pedigree, right?
And it's funny. Yeah. What's funny is that Taron Egerton, who is now everybody knows him from the Kingsman movies and as Elton John in Rocket Man, he does the voice of Rian in the new Age of Resistance. And he said he was so starstruck meeting him because he's such a Labyrinth fan that it's like,
you're the baby. That's great. Awesome. Yeah, there was an animated sequel that came out, and it's called The Power of the Dark Crystal, and it was directed by Genndy Tartakovsky, who did Clone Wars, and he's done Samurai Jack and a couple other things. But I didn't get a chance to look at it or see it, and I think it's a sequel. It's not where this new show is a prequel. It's been laying dormant since '82 for all intents and purposes. And let's get into it, because this, oh man, Henson's legacy is all over this, and it is absolutely exquisite.
But first,
good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The management of this drive-in theater is happy to announce you can enjoy your favorite form of movie entertainment regardless of rain. No longer will it be necessary to let rain spoil your fun. Now you can keep your windshield clear and dry with a drizzle guard. Simply attach it to your windshield, and in a jiffy, you're enjoying the movie without constantly running your windshield wipers. A drizzle guard will save you gasoline and wear and tear on your battery. After the show is over, all you do is take off your drizzle guard, roll it up, and it's ready to be used again, just like an umbrella. So next time it rains, don't sizzle in a drizzle. Get yourself a drizzle guard and enjoy the show. Drizzle guards are on sale now at the concession center.
10 episodes on Netflix.
Yeah, and I thought it was 8 too, so that's why I had to scramble a little bit. Yeah. I'm like, oh, I got 1 episode left, and it's like, wait a minute. No.
And it takes place. It's a prequel, and it takes place 1,000 years before.
Trine? Is that what how they calculate years? They call them trines, right?
I think
something like that. Something. It wasn't years, but yeah.
That was an Aughra term, I think it was.
Oh, they used it. Well, so you open up and they kind of lay out the world. And who do we have as our voiceover actress? Is Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah.
When has she become like, she's cornered the market on like this voiceover, like, right? Not only like was she, well, I mean, she played herself in Finding Dory, but wasn't she the computer in Wall-E?
Yeah.
Like, right? She's done, at one point she was the voice of the Futurama Planet Express ship for like 1 episode.
But I love it though. I love it. She is just such a genre queen just from
that's just it. When you hear her, you know it's her. And I'm just like, but you hear her in the first episode and that's it.
You know, but she must love this stuff in order to take all this, you know, Cabin in the Woods.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's a great, yeah, you're right. But the voiceover stuff, I'm just kind of like, wow, she's like all over the place here.
So, and it doesn't stop at her. It's star-studded.
Which is, like I said, I'm not a big fan when they bring in all these big name talent, but you really don't know. I mean, once you know it's Mark Hamill, then you can't unknow it. But like Taron Egerton, I thought he was well cast.
Yeah.
Simon Pegg kills it. You know, toward the end of the series, we're introduced to these 2 characters, a Wanderer and a Heretic. It is Bill Hader and Andy Samberg, and they absolutely are phenomenal.
And you would never know that unless you read that was them.
Yeah, that's only in doing, you know, you got Jason Isaacs as the Emperor, Helen Bonham Carter, Lena Headey, Harvey Fierstein, which that guy's about as, you know, right. About the only big name guy that comes from the world of puppets is Kevin Clash, who played Aughra. Now he's the guy who animated and does the voice for Elmo.
Right. Controversially. So
well, that seemed to have kind of gone away, right?
It does. Yeah. I was shocked to see him in the documentary.
I know.
Like,
and he's yeah.
Like, is that the same guy?
Yep. Because that was on Netflix for a while. Being Elmo, was it? Or
yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
So we also have some of the lesser known actresses that are here, but that we know here at TMI. Anya Taylor-Joy, who is from the Split and then from Glass. Yes.
Yep.
We've got Missandei from Game of Thrones. She's there. She plays Deet. She's the voice of Deet.
Benedict Wong,
Beyonce from Doctor Strange.
Keegan-Michael Key, he's in there. Awkwafina, Toby Jones.
I am not the recording, Fräulein.
And as you said, Mark Hamill, completely unrecognizable as the.
Well, like I said, you know, if you ever listen to any of his dialogue that he does for the Joker in the Batman animated series, every now and again he kind of lapses into that. But yeah, by and large, they all have their own kind of voice. And Taron Egerton, I was clueless that was him until I started seeing some of the, you know, it was like maybe 5 or 6 episodes in when I started writing notes. All right. And then once you hear it, you can't unhear it. But,
you know, and I'm convinced because we've got a lot of the same species here. We've got gelflings. We've got obviously Skeksis. We've got mystics. We've got Aughra, who is her own being. That you don't see any other Aughras. You don't see.
No, well, she like you said before, she's like Yoda.
Yeah,
she's like one and done.
And you've got podlings. One of my favorite characters is Hup, the podling.
Oh, he's awesome.
That stone in the wood.
And I am convinced that they used Tattoo from Fantasy Island as the model for Hup.
Monsieur, good shooting.
I've never killed a midget before, but there can always be a first time.
Oh, monsieur.
Hervé Villachet.
But yeah.
He's about the only one that breaks almost into a separate language kind of a thing. where sometimes you don't understand what he's saying. But I'm going to say it right now that without the success of Game of Thrones, this would never exist. I feel there's a lot of Game of Thrones world building and very inspired, especially when you start getting into the different tribes. There's 7 tribes of gelflings, and some of them live underground. Some of them, it just, as opposed to warring families, you have like these different factions. There's a lot of machinations going on. The Almadra, there was the Queen, and the like you said, the Chamberlain and the backstabbing that's going on within the Skeksis' own world. I just feel that it really owes a huge debt to Game of Thrones. And
plus the fact that Netflix is probably looking for the next.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know, right? Are people going to be turned away? They're like, oh, I never, because it's already a known property and because it's puppets. But I'm going to tell you, this is unbelievable to look at. The production value on this, the lighting. The one thing I noticed is that the camera never stops moving. There's a scene, I don't know, episode 4 or 8, where it's just 7 characters standing around and they're talking to the Queen and they're trying to make and the camera is just swirling around them, with nothing but dialogue going on. There's no action. And it just keeps you like so engrossed. It did take me a bit to kind of get all the character names. Because like you said, you got Bria, you got Rian.
And forget about the Skeksi names. I'm very thankful that they name them like General.
Right.
Chamberlain.
Chamberlain, yeah.
It's like Skek Yor, Skek.
Right, yeah. There's always like a Skek, yeah. Skek Bob.
But then you've got Emperor, you've got General, you've got Chamberlain. And, and the Hunter. That he is unique to this series, and one of the probably the most awesome Skeksis that they have in their stable.
Yeah. Oh, this is a load of fun. I mean, you walk right in. I think one of the first scenes, you go to the Harar library where you meet not Dee, it's Bria, and it's just massive set of just books, and there's shit everywhere, and the gilded staircasing, and the camera's kind of like lovingly going around, and there she is, and she's drawing in her little book, and you're just like that's where I really want to get into like the making of. Because I'm like, how much am I looking at is CG augmented, or is this really, did they really go and build this set to this level?
And they illustrated that book. They actually take you through that book in.
Do they? Because it's all like hand-drawn, like watercolor illustrations that she's.
Exactly.
I can't say enough about this. I mean, I was at a wedding last night, and that's part of why my throat is so sore. And my wife's cousin is a diehard. He works in the filming industry, and we're constantly comparing notes on movies like this. And he's like, I don't have time. I said, you need to make time. I said, just even if you don't want to get invested in, and he's a huge Game of Thrones fan. I said, but just from an artistic point of view, this thing, you know what it is? When I'm watching this, like I felt the same way that I did when we first watched Into the Spider-Verse. I've seen Spider-Man stories before, and I've seen cartoons, but I'm watching something I've never really seen together. And that's exactly the way I feel with this. It's just the vibrant colors and the character development and the world building is phenomenal.
The movement of these, I don't want to call them puppets. That's doing them a disservice. It's still the same technology base, which is so impressive that they've used in Dark Crystal, but it just looks so much better. The facial movements of the gelfling.
Yes.
Alone.
Yeah. Now, did they have like off-camera guys with? Is there a lot of like animatronics inside?
There's
the face
there's animatronics in the face that shows the eyebrows raising and the blinking.
Right. Yeah, and they don't always blink. Right. But the ears. The ears will pull back.
Like, you look at the set and it's still like. There's holes and trails cut in the floor, so the
puppeteers. And my guess is that you're pulling a lot of these guys out of retirement, because really, outside of the Muppet Show, where have you seen
who has that capability? Yeah,
correct. And I think a lot of it has to do with the editing as well, because you'll see like a waist side shot of the characters, and then as they're stepping out of a chariot, you'll see a foot, just like the foot on a step or whatever, and then they cut back to the character hitting the ground. So they're giving you the illusion. Do you remember the first time you ever saw Bert on Sesame Street with legs when he was doing the pigeon, right? And it's a full on Bert And it's like, we've never seen his legs before. That's
right.
I'm blowing my mind right now.
Right.
So, and then later on, you've got this battle, and Rian is fighting the hunter, and he's like a full character. He's like a person in a costume.
And now I was going to ask it because they don't really divulge much about that aspect of it in the documentary.
That's where I get sidetracked though, because I'm like, how are they doing this?
But in the original Dark Crystal, you can tell in a lot of the scenes where you're seeing a full body Jen or Kira that is somebody in a costume. That's
and you know
around.
what we didn't mention on that. So Deep Roy and Jack Purvis were two little dwarves who they employed when they did a lot of those full body. Now Deep Roy has gone on to do numerous things, including the last iteration of Charlie Chocolate Factory. There,
he
played all of the Oompa Loompas. Jack Purvis was
him. You're saying that was him in the original '82 Dark Crystal?
Yeah. They were employed as so a lot of shots when you had like the pull away shots and you saw the character just walking around, because Aughra's full on a person in a costume. There's points where she's dancing, and then there's other times that she has to be a Muppet.
I hear it! I feel the Song of Thra in my heart! I see all the paths laid before me! Woo! Ha! 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 Ha!
Now the Skeksis are straight up people in costumes.
Yeah, and from what I understand about the Skeksis, we alluded to this earlier, but there's two people that actually have to operate the Skeksis. 2 arms are required, so it couldn't be just one person. There's one arm going into the head to operate those maquettes, and there's the other arm going into either the left or the right. And a second person has to be in there to operate the other arm.
The other arm. Because if you ever watch like Sesame Street, now when Carol Spinney, that's it. One arm, your left arm is probably inside his wing, and then your right arm is up inside the head armature so that you can move the head and move his mouth. Right. But usually the right wing is attached with a filament string. So if I move my left arm, that other wing goes with it.
And I noticed the same thing for Puffin Stuff. Watching that for last week's episode, Puffin Stuff usually has one dead arm.
Now that's a talent in and of itself, because you're inside this costume and you're probably sweating your ass off, right? And Puffin Stuff had a big giant head.
I know.
Monstrous.
And you had to move both the upper and lower lip,
and
right?
you probably had to like bounce just to get that thing flapping.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're going on and on, but we're not even really getting into the bones of the guts of the story itself.
So it's 1,000 years previous to the events of Dark Crystal, and the Gelfling are fully fledged, going strong. They have not been eradicated or wiped out yet. And there's actually 7 Gelfling clans.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because they're all racially different.
Kind of like, although by and large they do. Like I said, I had a little bit of an issue with some of the names early on, and especially 2 of the characters look very similar to each other. And I'm like, is that racist if I say they all look the same? But you're right. The Deet character is subterranean.
Yeah, and
which is cool. And now she looks older than the other guys who live above ground.
And Deet, she's got a greenish sheen to her skin because she never sees sun. And the great thing about Deet is her eyes. Her pupils are huge because she has to. She needs.
So they thought that through. Yeah. We do meet one of the warrior races that looks just like a straight up Na'vi flying on a
absolutely.
Yeah. But it's great to see, especially because in the first movie you get 2 of them, and now you got like an entire 7 cultures, and they're about as different from each other as could possibly be.
Yeah, and again, my favorite being the Groton, which is what Deet was, and Deet was probably my favorite of the Gelflings, I think, of this show. She was I
think she had the biggest, not storyline, but she had the biggest emotional.
Yeah, and it kind of hinged on her. It kind of hinged on her at the end, especially.
Yes, yeah.
If the darkening can't be destroyed, then how do I defeat it?
Like all energy, it can only be transferred. Move!
Teach me how! Please!
Blessing or curse, I do not know, but my power is yours.
And obviously they do leave it wide open that, we, for all intents and purposes, we're going to continue the story, and you're going to hopefully see a season 2.
Now here's where I had questions. Right from the opening get-go, when you see the Skeksis, They're still 1,000 years earlier. They're again in their castle, just like you see them 1,000 years in the future.
Right, they don't really advance much.
Yeah, and
because they're immortal, right?
Right, yeah, because they're draining the crystal.
And they don't change their clothes because it's the same exact.
So the Chamberlain's there, the Emperor's there, who dies in the Dark Crystal movie, but the Emperor's there.
Spoiler.
So he's there too. But the difference is that they actually employ gelflings to guard them. Now, it is very easy, apparently, to take these gelfling guards out if you're a Skeksis. So why they would need gelflings to guard them?
Right, and really, they're at the top of the food chain, too. So, you know, they all were worshiping the Skeksis, so it's not like they really had any enemies. But, yeah, they did have these, what they called them? The guard was...
the castle guard, or the crystal guard, or the something.
No, I thought they had a name, though,
okay.
Regardless.
The Mystics aren't brought into this until a few episodes in.
No, yeah. Well down the line.
So you're thinking, okay, what about the beings that they used to be before they broke the crystal? But that's never really brought in.
No, that's even farther back. Sigourney Weaver sets it up right from the beginning that they're aliens from another planet, and they come down here and they coerce Augur. They fool her into drawing her attention away from the crystal.
But as Skeksis, right? But not as these other...
Yes, as Skeksis, correct. You're right. Yeah, that is... you know what? Now that you bring that up, that is interesting because, right.
Because it was...
So where did that separation, where did that split come from?
Yeah, they established in the movie that it was the crystal that separated them.
That separated them.
I don't know.
Okay, but it didn't take away my enjoyment from this.
No,
like I said, I don't think that you even need to watch. Maybe by watching the original movie, it does give you too many questions that they're like, we're just going to pretend that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Where here, you can just enjoy it. Again, they kind of throw you, they give you a little bit, because you don't have 2 hours to get a story. You now have 20 hours, 10 hours now, to flesh out the storylines and some of the character motivations. I can't say enough about this stuff. And, these characters were fully realized for me.
Yeah, and like you said, Simon Pegg does a full-on... I think he brings them to another level in this thing.
Yes, yeah.
Prevaricator! Liar! It was you who took the vial from my cabinet.
I tried to protect Vial, but scientists attacked me, knocked Vial from my grasp. It was then that stinking gelfling snatched it up. Scientist is still Skeksis, yes? Perhaps scientist would most benefit seeing Peeper Beetle.
Excellent suggestion.
That is one thing, yeah. They really...
And it's funny because you see him in that documentary in the recording studio making all these little moaning and yummy noises that Chamberlain makes.
Yeah, there's some very, very disturbing imagery in this as well.
Oh, it's nightmare-inducing imagery.
There's a dinner scene in episode 4 that gives the Temple of Doom banquet scene a horrible run for its money. It is just a gross out factor. You got one character that for whatever reason, the Skeksis, she's just snotting green goo out her nose the entire show.
And she's got bursting pustules and everything
right.
else.
And it's just like did somebody just be like, this will be funny, let's do this for 10 hours? Because it's gross, and she's like wiping it on the side. So
they set up this world where, as you said, the Skeksis are the top of the food chain, and all the other beings that live in Thra, the gelflings, the podlings, they all kind of the Skeksis are their overlords,
and they're happy about it.
Yeah,
they're convinced that the Skeksis are looking out for them. They're their lord and protectors, and we will give whatever we need.
And this is where it kind of, I thought, it really tries to tie into politics. This is the message, if anything. The Skeksis are trying to divide the gelflings. There are 7 different clan of gelflings in this existence in Thra, but none of them really like each other. The Harar think that they're the smartest and they're above everybody else. Everybody looks down on the Grottons because they're underground.
They're underground.
You've
literally.
got the Stonewood gelfling, who are the dirty ones in the forest. So none of them like each other. And the Skeksis want to keep it that way because that's how they rule, like divide and conquer.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. That is like 101.
Yeah, and so that's where I think the arcs of all these, so you have hero gelflings from each one of these clans, in some cases more than one, from each one of these clans that kind of band together. And you can call them, as we often do, the Scooby Gang of the Dark Crystal. Yep. And it's great because it's almost like an ensemble cast. Once you have your main gelfling from each of these clans, like the story sometimes follows Deet and Hup, or sometimes the story follows Rianne. And sometimes it follows Brea. Yeah. Brea, whatever. And each of these clans have their own queen. So you have the Almadra is what they call their queen. And played by, I think it's the Harar's queen, is Helena Bonham Carter.
Yeah.
And she's killed by the Skeksis, and that's kind of what is the... Rihanna already knows that the Skeksis are bad because they've killed his girlfriend for her essence, and he's the only witness. So they think he's her murderer. They would never think that their Skeksis overlord would do such, but he's trying to get the word out.
Yeah, they're actually created like a smear campaign.
Yeah,
to blame him for it
against him.
Yep. So none of the other gelflings wanted to help him out because they're like, oh my god, that's the guy who killed his girlfriend.
Until they kill the Almadra.
Stop watching Fox News and we can get on with
this. So they finally kill the Almadra, and the Almadra has 3 daughters. You've got Brea.
They all look the same.
Well, no, actually not. They've got
Celadon.
Celadon, who looks the most evil out of the 3 because she is the one that blindly follows the Skeksis even after her mother.
Well, you have to. I mean, it is called the Age of Resistance, and she was resisting. She didn't want to. I don't think that she really wanted to admit that they've been falsely following me.
Right.
You know, and she was like, no, my mother was a dumb bitch and she got killed, and now I'm going to take her place and we're going to go back to the way it was. Yeah, she does come around, but not before getting almost sucked into essence.
And then you've got Tavra, who is the 3rd sister.
Tavra, that was
the warrior of the 3.
Yes, and Tavra.
Talking about Celadon, that's one of the more nightmarish scenes when she goes to the Skeksis herself to kind of plead for their mercy, and she's immersed herself in Skeksis gear. She's got a Skeksis crown that she's
See, that's where I'm talking about, where it really kind of takes on like the Game of Thrones undertones, where these characters are slowly, you're peeling back these layers and seeing that maybe you were so nice after all.
Emperor, you are as wise as you are fair. Of course, a few traitors may hide within any clan, but punishment will be reserved for those who dare spread the filthy lie that you are draining gelfling.
But we do drain gelfling, so we may drink your essence.
She was a little too willing to just.
And she's offering. She is so just enamored of these Skeksis. She offers them 7 gelfling a year to drain their essence to keep
from each planet. Well, how many do we need? And scientist is like 50. Like I don't know, just 50. Okay, all right.
They laugh at her, and then they attack her all at once, and that scene is just horrific.
It is.
The camera is shooting it from above, and you just see the Skeksis envelop her.
Bound on her, yeah.
Just envision her being torn apart by these Skeksis, which doesn't.
Yeah, because that was the thing. She was like, "Well, what about this?" And he's like, no."
Yeah.
Gee, that's something else. No. And it's just like, oh man, this guy.
You can set up different profiles on Netflix, and they kind of note what you watch.
Taylor, yep.
In a very Big Brother kind of way, and they give you recommendations for things that you'd like. So our son has his own Netflix profile, and of course it's all kids stuff, and all you see when you look at his main menu is the various kids things that they have on offer, and the Dark Crystal is the first thing, the Age of Resistance.
Is it really?
I don't know if this is very age appropriate.
Yeah, no, there's some dismemberings going on. There's, like you said, a lot of backstabbing stuff. Chamberlain is he's just working that back room. He's doing whatever he can to get back into good graces. And he backstabs and takes out the general at one point.
Yeah, and there's so many nice lovely creations here that you didn't see in the first one. We didn't talk about Lore, the big stone monster.
That is one thing I want to ask you, as far as the way that there's no way in the world he's a puppet. The only thing I could take away is that he's a marionette and they CG'd out the strings.
Yes, you are right.
That
he's
is
not
exactly,
really a marionette. It's, if you ever saw some of the behind the scenes of Force Awakens and how they do BB-8 rolling.
Oh, so is he like an armature?
So it's somebody standing behind him.
Okay.
Making him move. And
so let's go back to episode 1 with C-3PO before he had his casing and he was just all wires. That's exactly how he was animated.
Yeah.
He was like a life-size puppet that somebody was just walking behind with, attached to the elbows or the shoulders or whatever. Okay, all right, I'll buy that. That's a phenomenal character design.
It is, and this is a character that's kind of given in secret to the Gelfling because Lore is underneath the throne room of the Al-Madra, and you'll find out later that Lore is a creation of the Heretic and the Wanderer, who are the Heretic. That's what we were talking about before. These are the characters played by Andy Samberg and Bill Hader.
And he really was channeling like Yoda, Fozzie Bear, and some of that stuff.
Yeah, he was.
They were just so happy to have an audience, but they were like an old married couple.
They were because these two are they are the same being. These are the two that were separated. This is the alien being that was separated. So this is the one good Skeksis, and he lives with his mystic counterpart. So that's why they call him the Heretic.
And he talks, and he kind of looks like Eeyore.
Are you alone here, Heretic?
Yes, I am alone. Yet, I'm also with myself. Ergo, get out here and greet our guests. Hurry up! Come on! We haven't got all day! These are the gelfling that found our message.
One. Did the message find them?
Would you just introduce yourself?
The Heretic is constantly telling him, come on, we don't have all day.
Say it. He'll finish the sentence for him, and he went,
So you find out that Lore was made by these two, that Lore is their creation. Did I get that right? I got that impression that Lore was from them.
Yeah, I believe that is exactly, yeah.
And what's great is he's got grooves in his arm and a needle, like a record player on his
But he only utilized that once, which was, I guess he had one message to tell.
Right.
He would be like, I wanted him to talk that way the whole way through, which I thought would have been great.
He could, on stage, he could stand behind Run DMC and scratch it up. He'd like,
so he was a great character. We did see another Landstrider, and I'm assuming they animated them the same way that they did in the old one.
Yeah, and was it just me, or did the Landstriders sound very much like Tauntauns from The Empire Strikes Back?
Yeah, that might have been a little homage. But then we see the Ascendancy, which are these spider-like creatures that the Skeksis are trying to manipulate into, because this darkening has taken place under the planet. And they're like, well, if they become infected, we can use them as like warriors. And they've got like these little baby, they almost look like a lobster mixed with a blood red orchid. And they attach themselves, and that's where was it Tavra? And they would take them over, and they would take them. It's almost like a mind meld. It goes on the side of their face, and all of a sudden they're like, "We are the Ascendancy." It's like the Borg.
It's like like the Borg, right?
We are the collective. Yep. Exterminate.
So that's why episodes 7 and 8 especially go very dark, because these are the episodes where the Skeksis attack Celadon, and this is also the episode where the Ascendancy makes zombies out of a lot of like the Groton and the other Gelfling as well. So pretty much become Gelfling zombies when the Ascendancy is over.
And the Skeksis have these little minions that have their mouth sewn shut. That right there is a disturbing image, just in of itself.
It is.
They're trying to talk.
Those were Grunax. They were called Grunax.
Oh, Grunax. I did not pick up that name at all.
So they have little slaves besides Gelfling, as you're saying. And so they look like potato heads, for lack of a...
No, they were just like these gray, mushy blobs.
Two guys, they're beaten down, they're pathetic, and they make their own resistance at the end, so you think they're going to escape, and they get killed.
They get bludgeoned. The one gets thrown. Oh, that was the one thing I didn't put in my notes, but how many characters do we have thrown over the side of a cliff? It's like it had to have been 5, where you just got the slow motion character falling into a fiery pit.
the Wile E. Coyote shop, right?
Exactly. You just didn't get the little puff of smoke at the end. The scientist goes all American Psycho on those two little guys.
Yeah, he does.
Oh, it was bad. I mean, it's implied. You see like you see a shadow of him pummeling the little thing, and then you just see like a blood splatter on the cage with the little creature in it, and you're kind of like, oh.
I'm gonna make a call back again to Mummenschanz. Ascendancy, when they all talk with their almost like mime, when the Ascendancy are all together and they speak to another character.
Oh yeah, yes,
their legs come together like hand. It's almost like making shadow puppets with your hands.
Yeah.
So I thought
it reminded me of the School of Fish in Nemo.
Yes, that as well. That as well.
And the one thing we didn't talk about, which is, so Rian is constantly trying to like tell everybody this is what's going on, and they would dream fast, which is kind of like Spock's, mind meld. Touch my hands and we can dream fast. You see my memories. And I'm like, is this like the equivalent of second base for gelfling? Like, hey man, I had sex with my wife last night. You want to watch? It's like, there's some voyeuristic crap going on there. And they were like, at one point, I think they were like mass dream watching. There was like 7 of them all together. Was that good for you?
But we haven't even talked about the MacGuffin, which was the dual glaive of this. So at some point,
that was a lot of running for nothing.
Yeah, Rian is told that he has to find the dual glaive, which is the only thing that can kill the Skeksis, but it's not really brought into much use because they don't want to kill anybody. The
minute he drops it shatters. Just like
I think he stabs the general with it.
He does kill the general, and that was a great fight sequence. That's where your mix of Muppets and full people in costume, it was just well done. It was really well done.
The whole thing is just amazingly done.
Yeah, but like I said, there's one scene where the hunter is like bouncing from tree to tree, and I'm like, there is no way that this has got to be CG. Like he's flying from tree to tree, and there was too much kinetic stuff going on that.
And you see, that's like you were saying before, how like the forearms come into play, and
right.
Hunter is the only one that's got like really
right. Yeah, he's kind of like General Grievous. Right? Yeah. All of a sudden he like pops them out, and he's got, I don't know. The longer I watch this, the more attracted I got to Rian, though. I guess maybe that perfect balance of androgynous sexiness just kind of seeped its way into my. I'm like, yeah.
Was it the Silkwood haircut that
it could be a Silkwood haircut? The bowl cut straight across. Yeah. I like it. Oh, we never gave the original.
No, so if we're at that point, let's do that.
But Dark Crystal is, I would give it a 3, but this miniseries, Age of Resistance, I got to go at least 4.5. It is.
Oh yeah, I'm right with the Age of Resistance. I'm right there with you.
Like I said, the legacy of Henson is in good hands. If this is the stuff they're going to come on, I'm going to say that Farscape might have been the last time that I saw Jim Henson's name attached to anything, and that was Brian Henson. But it was the Henson Company; it's his son.
And they're all over the documentary as well, so they have their hands in this. The Henson family.
Yeah, because I think that when Disney first announced Disney Plus, that there was talks of a new Muppet TV show, and that's now been nixed. But maybe that's because they're putting all their energy into this thing.
Yeah, maybe.
I applaud them. If this thing doesn't win some awards, just like Into the Spider-Verse, like I said, I'm watching something I've never seen before.
Yeah. So I would go. I'm right there with you with this new series. 4.5 buckets from me. Solid recommendation. Yeah. I'd even go a little bit higher on the original. 3.5, I think I'd give.
Okay, all right. Well, like I said, I didn't get a chance to rewatch it, so maybe now seeing it in the light and comparing it with this one, I've watched it numerous times over the years. But yeah, they've taken this to a whole new level.
Oh yeah, watch it. Do yourself a favor, watch it.
Yeah, now. It's 10 episodes where most of these shows are 8,
and some
of them are only like 40-50 minutes.
Yeah, and there is a lot of exposition in the first 2 or 3 episodes.
Yeah.
So, right. But it gets right into it.
Yeah. No, I mean,
after that.
Yeah. By the time you get to I almost thought that could have ended at episode 9, right when Rian gives out he's able to communicate. They find a sword and he communicates to all the other gelfling clans through the blue fire that we need to resist. We need to rise up. I could have easily seen it end there, but that last episode, the fight sequences, and you got explosions going on. They got a battle plan. The Skeksis show up, and they're in battle armor. And you've got all the gelflings. The female gelflings have wings, and they're flying around dropping these dirt bombs or whatever the heck they were. And so there's a lot of fisticuffs and sword and sorcery going on, as well as explosions. So very well done.
And again, wasn't a big fan of the Dark Crystal. So when it first came out as a kid, so watching this stuff now, I wasn't very excited about it, but I just fell right into that world with the movie, and this show just took me right over the top. I can't say enough good things about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Yep.
So that leads us to our confessional this week.
Confessionals.
We thought we would do a Jim Henson-centric confessional and ask ourselves, and this could be a movie, it could be a Muppet, it could be a show. What is our favorite Jim Henson creation?
That's really tough. I mean, I remember watching the Muppet Show. I think it ran like every night at 7:00.
It did. Point. CBS. I remember when it was syndicated.
Right. I mean, that was like in the heyday of the variety show. But you really most of those characters were created specifically. I mean, you had Kermit coming off from Sesame Street. The Muppet movie itself. And again, you were talking about seeing Bert for the first time full body.
Legs, yeah.
The opening scene of the Muppet movie where Kermit is riding a bicycle. And he's just a ball for a body, and a stupid little head that looks like it's a hand inside of a sock. That's all and he's got these spindly arms and legs, and he's riding a bike. And you're like, how are they doing that? And like as a kid, that was probably one of the first movies I ever saw on Laserdisc.
Yeah, and you can't erase anything back then. It's not like they erased the guy that was operating it.
No,
it's all practical.
Yeah, all practical. And the jokes in this movie stay with you. It was probably one of the first soundtracks I ever owned on cassette when my parents allowed me to join the Columbia Record House Club, and I know the songs, inside and out. So I'm gonna go with the original Muppet movie.
The Muppet movie, really?
The original Muppet movie, yeah.
So
yes, I have to.
Classic. I loved it as well. Vividly remember the day I saw that in the movie theater with a buddy of mine.
Yeah, and again, you're seeing something we've never seen before. Full body Fozzie Bear getting out of his Studebaker. It just crazy stuff. They took it to the next level.
And that was at the peak of the Muppet Show. I think that came out in between seasons 2 and 3, which was at the very peak, the pinnacle of the Muppet Show. So it was at its full popularity. The movie came out in 79.
79?
79. And the reason I know that is because after we saw the Muppet movie, we tried to sneak an Alien, which was in the next theater.
That's a double feature right there.
But the guy put his hand on our shoulders. He's like, "Nope, where are you kids going?"
Sorry, son.
Yeah.
Go back to your Muppet movie.
Yeah, I don't know where that guy was during It Part 2, but I
know, right? In a movie theater, everyone can hear you scream.
But I'm going to say, as a kid, my favorite Muppet from the Muppet Show, and I will always have a soft spot for Beaker. I loved Beaker. I laughed out loud every time Beaker came on.
Dr. Bunsen Honeydew.
Bunsen Honeydew and Beaker. Whenever there was a sketch with Beaker, that was my absolute highlight of watching the Muppet Show.
Nice.
So, and being a Bowie fan, I'm really not that big of a fan of Labyrinth, I have to say.
I know it's one of my sister's all-time favorite movies. I have not seen it in quite some time. I just remember his really tight leather pants.
Yeah, it's unnecessarily. I don't know what they were thinking. But I did read that they thought that not bringing him specifically, but that they thought bringing humans in was, first of all, and because they mentioned Labyrinth in this documentary about Dark Crystal, that bringing humans in, and they thought that maybe they alienated some of the audience that was
by just going straight up Muppets.
By going straight up Muppets and puppets.
And that was 86?
86. Was, and of course it was for budgetary reasons as well, that the Dark Crystal did cost quite a bit, but it did make some, and I didn't go through, even though I did look it up, the box office for Dark Crystal was $41 million, and it cost $25 million to make, so it did make a little bit of a profit.
Okay, all right.
But it's still very expensive for a movie of that type, and they thought
right, and like you said, the studio realized pretty quickly that they thought they had a bomb on their hands.
And that's why if you watch Labyrinth, a lot of those goblins that you see in the background are more of like the traditional Muppet type things than the puppets that you got in Dark Crystal. Much more intricate. And it's surprisingly, that's why Bowie signed on to Labyrinth, because he loved Dark Crystal so much, but then it ended up not being anything.
Not being,
yeah, at all. But yeah, I would say Beaker. And
okay, I like it.
So there you go. So next week, let's our coming attraction segment.
We're going to outer space, baby.
We're going out to outer space. So next week, we are going to outer space, as Jeff said. We are viewing Ad Astra with Brad Pitt. Now, this is the downfall of one of us going on vacation, because when that happens, sometimes we are not on the cutting edge of reviewing these things. We know it's been out about a week already, but it looks very good. So
I'm excited for it. It definitely looks like a return to kind of 2001-ish.
2001.
Is that the kind of the flair I'm getting for it?
Yeah, and along with it, I think we're going to revisit Jodie Foster's Contacts.
Oh no. Contact is one.
Chickapee.
I love this movie. I absolutely. This might actually be a $5 for me.
Is this a Blu-ray in your collection?
I don't have the Blu-ray. I have the DVD though. It is good though. So we'll be talking that.
We will be.
Yes. Why don't you watch along, and then you can join us. So, but that's next week, right?
That's
next week.
Yep.
So, well, Jim, always a pleasure.
Yes.
And I guess to our listeners out there who took the time to listen, we truly appreciate it.
Yes. And if you found us after you were upset, confused, infuriated by not being able to find Podcoin, and you took the trouble to actually seek us out on another app, thank you.
Yes, like I said, appreciate it, and have an awesome day.
All right, Jeff. See you next week.
All right. Bye.